Hare Krishna, everyone. This is acyuta-bhava, and today I'm taking another question in my Bhakti Q&A series. This series is devoted to Bhakti Yoga and the philosophy of Bhakti Yoga. And people who are learning more about it and have questions are free to email me anytime. You can email me info@nightlightastrology.com, put Bhakti Q&A in the subject line. Today's question is about ghosts. I thought this was kind of a really fun one. So let's dive in. Here's the question. What, if anything, does the Bhakti tradition say about ghosts? I'm asking because I was recently at a family gathering where a cousin told me she had hired a medium to answer concerns about my dead grandmother and her relationship to a family home they were trying to sell. A realtor saw a woman, perhaps my dead grandmother, in the kitchen when no one else was in the house. It got me thinking about ghosts and how, in some ways, they or stories about them are deeply embedded in our Judeo-Christian culture, and it made me wonder if ghosts have any part within Bhakti. Thank you. Well, super good question, super interesting. And so I'm going to approach this from a few different standpoints. I'm going to read a little bit of the 9th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita today, which actually addresses the topic of ghosts, as well as ancestors. Kind of interesting. And I'm going to tell you a story about my ayahuasca experiences with ghosts, even having an experience with my deceased grandmother in an ayahuasca ceremony, and kind of some of the things that I learned about what those two traditions have to say: ayahuasca shamanism, what shamans in the Amazon say, and also what the Bhakti tradition says in general. So I hope this is helpful for you. Let's start by taking a look at the 9th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. So in the 9th chapter, I'm starting with the 16th verse. Remembering that when it comes to all around the world, one of the reasons that people have spoken to the dead or have tried to communicate with the spirits of deceased relatives, not always, but often, is because of a tradition of propitiating the gods, propitiating the ancestors, approaching them for boons or blessings, offering them things in gratitude to keep or maintain the integrity of good fortune in a family or with the crops or something like that. So ancestor worship, and in some ways, because kind of a part of your question, ghosts aren't exactly the same as ancestors, but the spirits of deceased loved ones kind of cross into that territory. So I'm going to go down that road a little bit today. A lot of it has been about ritualistic approach of spirits or deceased relatives or things like that, in the same way that you might approach a god, who gives rain or who provides something. There's a really beautiful Disney movie that my girls watch called Coco. I don't know if you guys have ever seen it, but I'm kind of a connoisseur of Disney movies these days. And it's a really good movie about a little boy who goes into the land of the dead to help restore the memory of a deceased family member who is being slowly forgotten. And if they're slowly forgotten in the sight of the dead, then they vanish. So it's this big thing. But the point being that it's a good story, it's a fun story, but there's a lot of different cultures around the world that have a very meaningful place for the dead, for ancestors, for ghosts, as well as spirits, evil spirits, good spirits, guardian spirits, not so helpful spirits. So what does the Bhakti tradition say about this? It's not like we have a phenomenology of spirits that we talk about necessarily, although there are some big things we can say. Let's start with the 16th verse of the 9th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Here's Krishna speaking. Remember, Krishna is God who has come in avatar form. The avatar means one who has the one who has descended. So spirit, God coming into this material realm to be with us in a spiritual form and teach us. And that's what he's doing in the Bhagavad Gita. So here's Krishna saying, but it is I who am the ritual. I am the sacrifice, the offering to the ancestors, the healing herb, the transcendental chant. I am the butter and the fire and the offering. So all components of sacrifice, all components of ritual, all components of prayer, all components of offering, all components of those things that we do, Krishna says, I'm the basis of all of it. I'm the essence of all of it. I'm the fire that you offer things into to the gods. I'm the smoke that lifts it up into the air. I'm the healing herbs that you use and ask for the gods to bless so that they may work. I'm the timing of the planets that at the right time to use the right herbs. I mean, I'm elaborating, but I am the sacrifice, the ritual. I am the offering to the ancestors. I'm all of it. So that's a big statement. He goes on and says, I am the father of the universe, the mother of the universe, the support and the grandsire. I'm the object of knowledge, the purifier and the syllable Om. And he goes on to say that he's all of the Vedas, which are these instructional texts, many of which are about prescribed rituals. He says, I am the goal, the sustainer, the master, the witness, the abode, the refuge, and the most dear friend. I am the creation and the annihilation, the basis of everything, the resting place, and the eternal seed. O Arjuna, I give heat and I withhold and send forth the rain. I am immortality and I am also death personified. Both spirit and matter are in me. Then he goes on to say, those who study the Vedas, now he's talking about, again, texts, a lot of which were used for different kinds of ritualistic offerings and sacrifices for the gods and so forth. Those who study the Vedas and drink the soma juice, seeking the heavenly planets, which could include, for example, in some traditions, not necessarily this tradition, but could include, this is very similar to the idea of doing certain kinds of things to appease the ancestors or to connect to the right kinds of spirits to get the right kinds of results, as in a real estate deal, or making sure that there's fortune upon the family. Those who study the Vedas and drink the soma juice, seeking heavenly planets, which could also be called, you could translate that to almost like heavenly realms or heavenly experiences, worship me indirectly. Purified of sinful reactions, they take birth on the pious heavenly planet of Indra, where they enjoy godly delights. So he's saying it's very pious to do this kind of thing, to appease the ancestors, to be in right relationship with the ghosts of our ancestors past and so forth. However, he then says, when they have thus enjoyed vast heavenly sense pleasure and the results of their pious rituals, activities, or their good karma is exhausted, they return to this mortal planet again. Thus, those who seek enjoyment by adhering to the principles of these rituals, which he calls the Vedas, only achieve repeated birth and death finally. Then he goes on to say, but those who always worship me with exclusive devotion, meditating on my transcendental form, to them I carry what they lack and I preserve what they have. And why is Krishna saying this? Because Krishna is saying, I am everything. I'm the basis of everything. So shift your focus from ritual worship of gods and ancestors and so forth back to me, because I'm the one who makes any and all of that stuff happen anyway. And in a sense, anything you could get from that kind of worship, a lot of which is done with some degree of superstition and some degree of selfish interest, even if it's pretty virtuous, like he says, it's pious, but still the results are only temporary. Direct your attention to me, who I am the basis of all rituals, of all sacrifices, of all fires, of all herbs, of all offerings. And then you get a different result. Those who are devotees of the demigods, who worship them with faith, actually worship only me, but they do so in a wrong way. I am the only enjoyer and master of all sacrifices. Therefore, those who do not recognize my transcendental nature will fall down. So it's like if we don't recognize the one divine source behind all things and devote our hearts to it. Now, this is the Bhakti tradition, of course, right? Then any results we get from ancestral worship is only temporary. And it doesn't mean that we have to dislike or disregard or neglect family or culture or anything like that. But it is also about just understanding that where everything comes from and where everything returns is our source. Those who worship the demigods will take birth among the demigods. This is the important verse. Those who worship the ancestors go to the ancestors. Then Krishna says, those who worship ghosts and spirits will take birth among such beings. And those who worship me will live with me. Remember, in the ancient world in India, as in other places in the world, not only ancestor worship, but the worship of ghosts and spirits, of gods, all different kinds of gods, ghosts, spirits, ancestors, for the sake of acquiring knowledge or trying to understand something or get information, all these forms of mediumship or propitiation or ritual. So insofar as any of those things would be directed towards something selfish or even something pious, the underlying current that Krishna is talking about is one of trying to ascertain or get something. Now, in a lot of cases, these kinds of rituals or approaches would be accompanied by some form of sacrifice. Well, in order to get something, I have to kill something or let blood or something like that. So it's a complex, reality that he's speaking to. He goes on and he says, if one offers me with love and devotion a leaf, a flower, a fruit, or water, I'll accept it. So first of all, the standard is very, very low comparatively. Krishna says, look, all you have to do is remember me, think of me, acknowledge me, and even the smallest token will connect us heart to heart, soul to soul, source to soul, and start fulfilling everything that you lack and carry and preserve everything that you have, which is what Krishna promises us that he'll do in the previous verse. Whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you offer or give away, and whatever austerities you perform, do that as an offering to me. In this way, you'll be freed from bondage to karma in its auspicious or inauspicious results. With your mind fixed on me in the principle of renunciation, you will be liberated and come to me. Then he goes on to say, I envy no one. I'm not partial to anyone. I'm equal to all. But whoever renders service unto me in devotion is a friend, is in me, and I am also a friend to him. Even if one commits the most abominable action, if he's engaged in devotional service, he's to be considered saintly because he's properly situated in his determination. So even all sorts of faults and flaws are overlooked. You don't have to be pure or clean ritualistically to give something to God. So anyway, he goes on, but that's the one part of the Gita that mentions ghosts. And I find it's interesting that if you can understand that there's that dimension, I mean, just because when you mentioned it, that there was a medium, dead grandmother, a home trying to sell, trying to get something done. Maybe there's an ancestral spirit that needs to be appeased. See, all of this kind of stuff. The Bhakti tradition would say, not that that's not real, not that you couldn't do a prayer and maybe, please the dead grandmother or, whatever the case might be, talk to some spirit that's hanging out in the house. I'm going to talk about this in a second with ayahuasca, but I saw all that kind of stuff firsthand. I'm an absolute believer in all of that kind of stuff. But in the Bhakti tradition, we say, water the roots of the tree, which means, a lot of the times in life, we have a problem selling a piece of property or something like that. In this example, so we might go and, hire a medium who probably has real skill and ability, probably a good person, probably pious, just as the Gita says, to help us move the spirit relative to the sale of the house. Bhakti, we take a different approach. In Bhakti, we surrender the results of our actions, and we maybe have a home altar where we bring Krishna some flowers and water and incense and candles every day. We say, gosh, it's out of my hands what happens with this house, but I know it's in yours. You're the source of all of this, all the good things that happen, all the challenging things that happen. You're behind all of it. Not even a blade of grass moves unless you're moving it. And so I surrender this to you. I hope the house sells, but if not, I know it's because it's in your interest. And in that sense, we go right to the source, pour water right on the roots of the tree. And from there, often enough, if a spirit needs to move out, it'll move out. Or if if there's ancestral healing that needs to happen, it happens. So all of these things can happen, but it's almost like we want a different kind of result. We're going to the root of the problem. We're going to the source of all things. That's the idea in Bhakti. So it's not that ghosts don't exist in a sense. It's just a teaching about who and what we associate with and what approach we take to problems in life or rituals in life and their purpose in general. So at any rate, there's a lot more that could be said, but that's kind of a brief answer to at least get the wheels turning. As someone who drank ayahuasca for a long time and actually had experiences in ceremonies with deceased people, there was in fact, there was a ceremony that I had one time where someone kept coming and saying a name to me over and over. And he said this man's voice telling me his name and saying that he wanted me to say this name to another gentleman in the room. And it turned out that this man's name was the name of a young boy that another man in the ayahuasca ceremony had fought in Vietnam with and had died by his side in Vietnam. That was, I mean, that was outstanding, and it brought some degree of peace and closure. And I can't deny the reality of these kinds of things at all. And I don't look upon that as though, you know, it was some kind of transgression or, you know, whatever. But also, you know, one time in a ceremony, I had a connection with my deceased grandmother, and in dreams sometimes, and I know this is very common. I don't think we're trying to avoid it, shut it down, ignore it, but it's about, it really is about what's the reason or purpose behind this interaction. For example, in Bhakti, we also talk about idle talk, you know, like carrying on and gossiping or talking about things that are irrelevant or that distract or that don't somehow dovetail and bring us back to talking about God or appreciation for God's beauty or appreciation for soul and spirit and creation, that these things end up entangling us. So interestingly, after that ceremony, the shaman came to me and said, that was neat. And you should be careful, because once the spirits see that you will entertain them in your mind, they'll start lining up one after another, after another, after another, and they won't stop coming. And they're just like people, you know, would you in New York City, would you stop and, you know, carry people's messages all over the city for other people while you were on your way to work? No. So similarly, you know, don't let the glamour of spirits and other beings like enamor you. That was what the shaman told me. And so from then on, I had many encounters with other kinds of beings and spirits and so forth, but I didn't pay them as much attention. And not because I was trying to say, oh, you're evil or bad, but almost because it's like people, like, be really careful who and what you associate with and why. What's the reason? A lot of the times behind ghosts, there's a kind of fascination that's not entirely healthy. That's the point. And I'm not trying to tell you what's what, just this is what my teachers have taught me. The other thing that I found really interesting about you know, what the Bhakti tradition has to say about this is that in the Srimad Bhagavatam, another one of our classic texts, it's said that there are, you know, 8,400,000 species of life, and these are not just like earthly creatures. These are like all sorts of different extra dimensional species of life that are in different dimensions of consciousness. So, and different planets and worlds and stuff like that. So it's a pretty far-reaching sense of what kinds of beings are out there. But the other thing I appreciate about it is that it's like, look, the extent to which any being in any kind of relationship can exist out there and be a part of drawing you closer to God, great, foster that relationship. Basically, the degree to which relationships are a distraction or entanglement into something else, avoid those at all costs. And be careful, because, you know, extra dimensional beings are a little bit like mystical powers. They can be very enamoring, and, you know, mystical powers, extra dimensional beings, a lot of the times these are going to be distractions from something as simple as a leaf, a candle, fruit, flower, water, given from the heart in love, serving other beings in love, without any, you know, agenda, without any need for any kind of special experience or power. Love is so simple. So that's what I come back to. I hope this was helpful and sensitive and not dismissive, but that the message comes across. So thank you. And great question. If anyone has any other questions, feel free to email me, info@nightlightastrology.com, put Bhakti Q&A in the subject line. And until next time, Hare Krishna.